The government is focusing on increasing domestic support to 60% and has introduced new revenue administrative measures to increase its tax base. These new measures include e-filing and e-payment to be implemented by the Rwanda Revenue Authority and will reduce compliance costs for both tax administration and taxpayers.
Like this move of the electronic filing, it is aiming at attracting, at catching most of the taxpayers. Because I look at, for example, in VAT, these electronic generated invoices, you cannot claim your input VAT if you don't have these invoices. So people have been just moving around and not paying taxes, but now they're going to be caught in the net. So my advice is for them to register voluntarily under VAT system so they can pay taxes. So the tax base is going to increase. The campaigns that the RRA is having, the campaigns that RRA is now strategizing on is to capture as more taxpayers into the tax net as possible so that they reduce the informal sector. And most likely in the next budget, you will find we can even go up to 70%. We're not talking about 60% domestic funding, but we are slowly going up.
And we believe that for us to be able to reach there, we cannot just rely on the Rwandan market alone. We have also to rely on the regional market, on African market, on the global market, and also be able to choose specific areas where we can have focus in terms of growing our economy. And we believe we're in the right direction in terms of doing this. But we can only succeed if the government works together with the private sector, create a conducive environment, but at the same time create a very good macroeconomic stability.
You'll notice that late last year, the donor funding stopped coming in as much that as was happening in the previous years. Quite a number of the OECD countries have reduced the money that they were giving to Rwanda. So they found themselves in a bit of a crisis where they had to look for alternatives for funding. The one thing that they came up with was the Agaciro Development Fund, which was what is similar to the Harambee in Kenya. But there's only so much that you can do with citizens, contributing to try and fund revenue. So it is commendable that, yes, they are now concentrating on raising funds from the domestic market internally to balance off whatever was lost from the donors.
From an East African community perspective, the common external tariff for Rwanda was finalized with some changes on tariffs for food crops like rice down to 30% from 75%, wheat grain and common external tariff of 0% instead of 35%, and wheat flour a common external tariff of 35% instead down from 60% respectively.
There are no significant changes because when you look at areas that have been tackled, there are no significant changes apart from a few changes in CAT and changes in these new taxes like mining tax, the royalty tax, and also the revision of the investment code. And even when you look at it, above all, it has not been significantly revised.
Rwanda continues to achieve moderate inflation, falling from 8.2% in December 2011 to 3.9% in December 2012. From 3.3% in March 2013, inflation is projected to rise gradually to 7.5% by the end of 2013 as the country continues to struggle with high import rate without a corresponding rate of exports.
As you know that issues like inflation and interest rates, these are not only issues that are specific to Rwanda. They also happen to, the region and the world in general. So it's up to the government to really put in place measures to control the inflation rates and the interest rates. But you'll see that by and large, Rwanda is recording more than the average growth in East Africa. If you compare the 8% growth that they were able to pull out in 2012, it's much higher than the 6.7% in the East African region. So in some way, I would say that they are way slightly, let me say slightly ahead of the pack in terms of the other East African countries. And if you've noticed that from 2013, the rates are coming down for inflation. The interest rates are also coming down. So I think it's a good thing, and it's going to affect the Rwanda economy positively.
Global developments, including a weaker global economy, led to reduced commodity export earnings, donor aid flows, and migrant remittances, all of these aspects impacting negatively on the country's domestic economic performance. Both Rwanda's budget and economic policy statement for the year 2013-2014 fiscal year is built on a theme of striving for self-reliance and dignity.
It has taken care of all the areas we had raised, and everything is captured. To me, what remains is all about the monitoring, which the Parliament should do as an oversight role, to see if really what the allocations, the budget allocations, the little resources have been allocated and have been implemented and utilized by the very specific programs and activities we had agreed. So to me, I'm very comfortable.
We had capacity gaps, mainly in terms of the balance. We've been investing heavily in formal education, where you go and get university degrees, get PhDs, and you come and work in specific areas. But to grow the economy, it requires beyond that. Indeed, as I mentioned in Rwanda, we've made significant progress. We invested even in universal primary education at the 6-year level. Then we went to 9-year basic education. Now we are embarking and implementing the 12-year basic education, and also supporting all the skills which are rare in specific areas.
Rwanda's total domestic revenue for the next fiscal year is 994.9 billion Rwanda francs, which is 60.20% of the total budget, leaving external resources accounting for only 39.8% of 658.6 billion Rwanda francs of the total budget.
With this budget, it shows, it has given an orientation that it proves that poverty through EDPRS program, poverty is going to reduce tremendously compared to the last budget year, and definitely this will be a benchmark for the 14-15. That's why I was saying that it has proved that 60% self-reliance budget support our own revenues, it cannot allow us to go back anymore. So there are more potentialities even now that haven't been tapped.
We've been having a challenge of energy and financial resources, of course. And of course, no, we haven't done much. We still have some changes in the rural infrastructure. When we talk about the feeder roads and all those things, the transport sector, we still have some challenges. But much as we have been so serious in solving most of our people's problems, we feel that it's going to be in very short time we should have everything made it clear and solved.
Today, the country boasts of a B+ rating, which is fundamental to building investor confidence and attracting more foreign direct investment. This fiscal year, the government is focused on having a resilient economy despite the ongoing global economic challenges. The country's aim is to become self-reliant as major donors continue to face economic challenges.
It is a challenge, the withdrawal of donors. It's a big challenge. Rwanda has been funded by donors for quite a while, and 40% of the funding usually comes from the donors. Even for this year, they are estimating that 40% will still come from the donors. Earlier on, it was much higher. It was as much as 50%, 55%. So you can see they are trying to reduce the reliance on the donors. And one of the things that probably has happened, maybe some people have not noticed, but last year, in 2012, end of 2012, they terminated their treaty, tax treaty with Mauritius. That treaty was very one-sided. Interests, dividends, royalties were not being taxed in Rwanda. So a foreign investor could comfortably repatriate their profits out of Rwanda through Mauritius without paying tax. But when they terminated it and they said that now we want to have a treaty that will allow us to also make some money in Rwanda. Yeah, it's a sign that now they want to raise more money internally. Then there's also the other aspect of tax incentives. Probably Rwanda has had the best tax incentives in East Africa so far. If you have your headquarters there and you bring in certain amounts of money, you don't pay tax. If you are starting up project that is worth more than 1.8 million USD, then you could bring in building materials without paying tax. But once the donor aid started reducing, they started reducing on these incentives. So for instance, whereas 2 years back, there was 0% duty on building materials for investors who put in more than 1.8 million USD. Last year, it went up that you had to pay about 10%. This year, it's been abolished altogether. So you have to pay the full duty rates of 25%. This, of course, will raise revenues for the government. You'll also see that the government is also pursuing other revenue sources. One of them is borrowing. In Kenya, you see that there's a lot of domestic borrowing. But in Rwanda, the economy is a bit small. So if they decide to borrow a lot of money from the domestic market, there is the risk of crowding out the private sector. So what they have done is they've gone to the capital markets in Europe and borrowed through a Eurobond about 400 million USD. So you can see they are putting up a mixture of alternative funds, sources of funds to fund their budget. On one side, trying to improve compliance and collect more by using the e-filing and e-tax, as you said. Also reducing on the incentives and renegotiating treaties that are not benefiting them fully, and also borrowing from external sources. And obviously these ways of raising revenue, alternative sources of revenue, are going to help them to achieve their goals.
Using our capital market, which is now where we have a stock market, we have a bond market, and a commodities market that is now already registering success in terms of agricultural commodities such as beans and maize. We want it to grow to include coffee, tea, pyrethrum, and minerals as well, together with all other agriculture products. We believe that by growing that sector, it's going to also attract more funds around it. The venture capital funds, the equity funds, and other funds that are going to be developed, especially the ones for the private pensions that are going to be set up to make sure they can invest in the kind of facilities that will be on the capital market. That way will bring in more money for the private sector, long-term in nature, but also cheaper than maybe the current level where they are all banking on the banking system to be able to raise resources. So combining this one together with the conducive environment for attracting businesses here in Rwanda, we believe this is going to help in terms of growing more businesses. And that means more revenues because more jobs will be created, more companies will be paying taxes. We believe this one is going to help.